It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I am thrilled to have Dr. Keith Dorsey as our guest today. Now, Keith, I'm just going to share a little bit. I'll read a little bit of his bio, but I'm really going to tell you about our conversations because they've been so meaningful. He's an executive coach. He's a thought leader. He's an author with over 25 years of experience in leadership development, corporate governance, optimal diversity. His recent book, The Boardroom Journey, delivers practical strategies for women pursuing board seats. So this is why we have one of our incredible male guests on Her Success Story today. I'm going to just say, Keith and I have had an amazing time having several conversations before we even came on to record. Ladies, listeners, and the few good men who listen to this show, listen in to what leadership is really about. Listen in to the importance of what our service on boards are really about. Keith, thank you for joining me. Dr. Dorsey, thank you for being a guest on Her Success Story. I have to kind of jump in. How did this get started for you? I mean, we both said, we're in other chapters of our lives now. What was the catalyst for this for you?
It's been this serendipitous journey. And first of all, Ivy, thank you for having me on. And I truly appreciate being here. And you ask a great question. This has been an interesting journey where I often tell people I kind of let go and let God. This is my third chapter, the first being the U.S. Air Force for a number of years, and then just under 30 years in corporate America, working for a Fortune 1000 for almost 17 years and a Fortune 500 for almost 12 years, and which I was a turnaround specialist, and it was all in the silo of sales. I ran very, very large sales teams, and I would move my family from one location to the other, taking over challenging situations, and I would lift up the hood and really try to figure out if they were having a people, product, or process problem, and then begin to tweak the necessary areas. And then in this third chapter that I started in January of 2019, I call this my portfolio career of doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. That's when I got into executive advisory work and I started serving on boards. And then I decided to go back to school to get my doctorate in organizational change and leadership at the University of Southern California. And in doing so, I focused all my research around the lack of gender and ethnic diversity on corporate boards. And when I was writing my dissertation and I had a dissertation committee and chair assigned to me, it was my dissertation chair that said to me, Keith, look, a good dissertation is a done dissertation. And my friend, you have way too much research out there to narrow it down to actually have a really good dissertation. And you have to trust me and narrow your focus. And in narrowing my focus, I asked her, what do I do with all this other information regarding women and their challenges to getting on boards and their, I guess, enablers that they have developed and all these great themes that came from areas that were outside of just that one area she wanted me to focus on for my dissertation. She said, Keith, write a book. And that's what I did.
Hence, the Boardroom Journey was born.
Absolutely. And it was not on my bucket list. In fact, a lot of what I'm doing today was not on my bucket list, but serendipitously, I ended up here. And this has been such an incredible chapter of my life. So I'm really enjoying what I'm able to do. And I see it as generative work to try to make a difference out there in the world. And I took Ivy, the things that I did as a turnaround specialist for 30 years in corporate America, I transferred those skills over to this wicked problem called corporate board diversity and the fact that women weren't at parity on corporate boards. And I brought those skills over to this, coupled with my academic experience. And here we are. And I'm hoping that the boardroom journey and this whole process will help women do a few things differently to get different results.
So let's go there for a second. Because, first of all, I love how you've taken, and it's so interesting. Um, I know I have found this for myself, how we take our skills from whatever we've done in the past, even completely different industries, and how the skills we acquire are applicable to solve so many problems in new and different areas. And so I have to tell you, I love how you're taking your skill set in as a turnaround specialist to turn around having more women on corporate boards.
Absolutely.
Why is this a problem? Why does it matter?
Well, it matters because the ultimate goal, and I call it in my book, optimal diversity. The ultimate goal is to have the cognitive diversity or diversity of thought on boards. And so a lot of people figured if we focus on demographic or observable diversity, you ultimately will get diversity of thought on corporate boards. And that makes sense, and you should. But I really look at this as what I call optimal diversity, which is observable diversity plus diversity of thought equals optimal diversity. And to be intentional about bringing that diversity of thought on the boards. And the reason why I say that, sometimes people get confused and think that they have diversity of thought when sometimes they don't. And I gave an example in an article that I wrote for directors and boards a couple years ago, and basically said that this company in the Northeast had 5 members on their board. And if you walked in their boardroom, you would think they had tremendous diversity on their boards. That you would see several women, you would see people of color, you would see a range in ages, and it just appeared to have diversity on their board, which they did from an observable or demographic standpoint. But what I uncovered is they didn't have diversity of thought because all 5 of those board members grew up in the same sort of suburban neighborhoods, affluent suburban neighborhoods. They all went to Ivy League schools for the undergraduate and graduate. They all worked for a major consulting firm, a big four consulting firm. And so, really, did they really have cognitive diversity in that boardroom? And so, by being intentional about seeking cognitive diversity, which I call optimal diversity, that's the big difference.
Well, in your background in sales, okay, and so I'm just kind of starting to connect some dots here. In your background in sales, when we're building a company, right? We have to know who our buyers are. A buyer very often, although we niche to a degree, right? But if you're building something big, your buyers are going to be fairly diverse.
Mhm.
Your customers are going to be diverse. So if you don't have that leadership from different parts of the country, different I love how you're referencing different demographics, right? Somebody who went to community college and built their way up, they might have ended up at Wharton, which is great, but they started from a different background.
They grew up on a farm. This one grew up in the inner city. To have that cultural capital that they bring, and with many different mental models and things like that. And oftentimes you will get that via demographic diversity, but sometimes, like in the example I just shared, you might not. But to be intentional about figuring those things out. And that's what women oftentimes could bring. And there are many studies about the different benefits that women will bring to the board. I remember one study said that women show up on time. And women attend more board meetings than men. And they changed the culture over time to make certain that men show up more prepared and more ready. But there are many different examples. Women challenge compensation issues a bit more. Women challenge the CEO even more to help them think outside the box. And so there are many examples as to why it makes sense to have more women on boards. And you truly want your board to represent and your stakeholders to represent or to represent the way the population of your stakeholders, and to have a board, let's say, that is all the members are from the Southwest, but you're a global organization. Does that make sense as well? So, yeah.
It's so interesting when you think about it. I'll date myself. There's a book from years and years and years ago called it's a relationship book, right? For all of those of us who are in relationships of two different types of genders. Not everybody is, but for those who are. And there's a book title that's called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, because men and women see and think differently. There's nothing right or wrong about it. There's not one right, there's not one wrong. We just approach things from a different thought process.
Yes. Yes.
And that piece on boards, when you have people together, see and thinking of things from a different thought process, that's where the win for the company is.
Yes, absolutely. And to be able to ask different questions, I often say that just by asking questions or the question, change ensues. Whether you agree with the question, just by having that question asked forces you to pause for a second and think, well, why am I doing something a certain way? And that's what women having at least a critical mass of women on boards, yeah, how they begin to make a difference. And a critical mass meaning at least 3 or 30% of the board members should be women. And in that scenario, that's where you could begin to truly make a difference and not be tokenized.
I was in a meeting earlier today with a woman who runs a very, very large marketing company. And we've done some collaboration in the past. And she is from the South, true, different background than the New Yorker here.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking, and she was like, that's that New Yorker in you. That's that Northeastern. That's how you approach things, right? The diversity of the two of us working on the same thing, we're coming from two different perspectives. And that's what I hear you're talking about, that importance in diversity. It's not about, X amount of men to X amount of women. It's that thought diversity that I love that you say, and has me, and I do a lot of these interviews, but it has me thinking differently. And I love that.
Yes. And that's what I call optimal diversity, when you're truly intentionally focused on more than just a demographic. You're taking it one step further to ensure you have that cognitive diversity as well.
So, Keith, what do you see moving forward? Right. So, we're in 2025. In the work that you're doing today, where do you see that going next? You're now an author. We have the Boardroom Journey out. You have a PhD from USC. I mean, you're brilliant, brilliant. And more than anything, no disrespect to academia, your years of experience are massive. Where do you see us going next? What can we as laymen, as women, what are our next action steps?
I would say right now, at many of the meetings and my speaking events, people walk in the rooms kind of with their shoulders low and their head hanging down because of what we're facing in society today. There's a out and out culture war
Mhm.
against anything that has diversity associated with it, and people are concerned that we're going to backslide. If you think about from 2020 to 2024, because of some of the social unrest and the attention on this, more and more women have been able to get on corporate boards. In fact, in 2018, when California started their Senate Bill 826, women represented 14% of the board members on corporations in California. And by the end of 2023, they had over 30% of the seats. And so there
That's
was,
over double.
yeah, there was significant growth.
Yeah.
And we saw the same growth. Now, women represent on Fortune 500 and S&P 500 boards over 30% of the board seats. And so we saw incredible progress. And most of that wave of progress that we were riding was over the moral imperative. People saw why it made sense to be at parity. But because of this culture war and anti-DEI war that we're faced with via the administration and other organizations at this particular point, it's kind of plateaued. And so, because we are facing and dealing with this, I am challenging women not to give up. I'm challenging organizations and boards not to stop doing what you know is right. Unfortunately, we rode the moral imperative wave, Ivy, way too long. And we needed to disrupt ourselves by incorporating the business imperative into everything we were doing regarding getting more women on boards. And their business imperative is huge, but we didn't incorporate it because that wave that we were riding called the moral imperative wave was just so much fun, and it was successful until we hit dry sand, and we did. So I'm challenging women to control what they can control. And you and I talked earlier, Ivy, that saying life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react.
I, that's right.
The 10% is the cultural war against diversity. The 90% is what we're talking about in the boardroom journey. And what can I do? The saying there is, if it's going to be, it's up to me. And there's this myth out there that there aren't enough qualified women to serve on corporate boards. Well, there are many, more than enough
No way.
qualified women
No way.
to serve. That
There is
that
no way. Yes, there is more than enough women.
way more.
I implore you, there is more than enough of us who, yeah, and here, and I'm going to chime in. I'm getting on my high horse just a little bit here, Keith. Okay. Here's why that saying goes, because women don't look at themselves in the mirror and see how qualified we are.
Yes.
We don't give ourselves our own respect, right? We're always seeing, oh, well, I could do this, but I'm not here yet. I'm this qualified, but once I get to here, I could then do it. Ladies, we have so much knowledge. We have our career knowledge. We have our life knowledge. We have our academic knowledge. Now, look, have somebody else read you what you have done in this world and then say, I'm ready. I can do this.
Absolutely. There's so much talent out there. And, part of what I try to do is to help boards fish where the fish are. And that there are many,
Love it.
many different other great fishing holes out there to find incredible talent, incredible fish in this example. And I want people to learn how to broaden their social capital to find the incredibly talented women that who can serve on boards. But then I want women to do things differently to make certain that they're not only seen and seen, but most importantly, known. And in the book, I talk about many different ways that women can make certain that they are known. Because when it comes to corporate boards, there's something that we call pre-vetting that goes on. And the pre-vetting that goes on out there are happening with the nominations and governance committees of these boards and with search professionals. And basically, there's no longer 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
And with areas like LinkedIn, platforms like LinkedIn, we can find people quite easily if you make yourself available and you're doing the right things on these platforms to be seen and known. But I challenge people to make certain that they are known, because once we begin to look for you, we're going to ask around the board table, who do you know? And if people know you, they're going to bring your name up, and then they're going to assign a task to the nominations and governance committee to pre-vet you, or they're going to reach out to a professional search firm and say, pre-vet this individual. Her name was given to me. And if these people that we begin to call who know you have favorable things to say about you, that's when you'll hear from us. But by the time you hear from us, know that you've already been pre-vetted. And so in one of my studies that I conducted, something came from out of that study, Ivy, that says it debunks something we have always known. And that saying was, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
You know,
And we've always known that saying and lived by it. But what came from out of this study was, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And when you begin to think about it from that angle, that's the best way to network. That's the true way to uncover more opportunities is to get more people to know you. And the example I often give, Ivy, is if you are sitting on a panel and you're on the main stage and there are 1,000 people in attendance and you scan the room and you see 30 people that you know, by the time you are done, 970 more people know you that you may not ever know. And you want those 970 people to say favorable things about you if we so happen to reach out to them. And so it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
who knows you, and building that brand so
Yeah.
people do know you.
Yes. And so networking isn't always about squeezing palms and kissing babies and handing out business cards. We often hear that, and when it comes to boards, 70 to 80% of the board seats are found via your networking. And a lot of people think, I got to go to a mixer and hand out my business card. And we're just writing an article and getting your article out in front of thousands of people. They know you. You may not ever meet them. By serving on panels and doing various different speaking events, they will get to know you even though you don't know them. So back to the saying, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows
Who
you.
knows you?
That
And what are we doing about that?
favorable things to say about you. And the
So
last
before
comment
we close,
yeah.
what is one thing that you can suggest to our listeners to do about building their brand so they are known?
A couple, like I just said, get your name out there. And then
Right.
two, almost like in a 12-step program, if you know there are people out there that can be found and would say unfavorable things about you, now's the time to go repair those relationships. Because if you worked with someone 20 years ago and your younger self, good people do bad things. And maybe 20 years ago, because you were so young, you didn't behave the way you would behave today. My advice is to go back and repair those relationships. And in the book, I talk about many different ways you can go back and repair relationships. And hopefully, you can get a few tips from that and begin to do those. Because if we reached out to that person in our pre-vetting and they had unfavorable things to say about you, you may not ever hear from us to be given the opportunity to interview for that board role. But if you repaired it and they had favorable things and even mentioned how you've grown over the years, you will still get that phone call.
I love that. And so be conscious, be consistent in building your personal brand is what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
I'm hearing of making sure the good and the bad have good things to say about you, repair relationships, be conscious of relationships, not just current, but past,
Yes.
and put yourself out there.
Absolutely. And I guess the last statement is let anyone and everyone know that you're interested in serving on a corporate board. You'd be surprised, based on the many studies that I've done, how many women got on the board from relationships that they never would have thought would have resulted in a board position, like with their babysitters,
Mhm.
their relationship with a dog walker, the relationship with obscure people in your lives, because they know people. And the question is always asked, who do you know that might be great for my board? And that question is asked of many people. And so don't just limit your networking and your relationship building to people of affluence and influence. Let anyone and everyone know what you will like. Connect the dots for them.
I love it. Dr. Keith Dorsey, thank you so much. Listeners, check out the Boardroom Journey. Most importantly, I'm going to say, think about, is being on board something that is in your future? Use the resources here at Her Success Story to find out more information, ask the questions. I learned a lot. Keith, I have to tell you, every time I talk to you, I learn something. So I love that. This is what I say at this point of our interview. Take a deep breath. Identify one thing that you took away from listening to Keith and I's conversation today. Jot that down somewhere. It doesn't matter if it's in your phone or on a piece of paper or wherever. No judgment. We don't care. But then the important piece is make the decision of what you're going to do with that one takeaway today and take that action. Every baby step adds up. And that's the great success journey. Thank you for listening to Her Success Story. Keith, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you, Ivy. It was great being here.
And listeners, if this was helpful to you, pass it forward. Hit subscribe. We come into your inbox with great new episodes every Monday. And let us know what you think. You have questions, let us know what your action is. We're here to support you in your growth, your development, and most importantly, your success. See you next time.